the last session for today. Well, for the last session and for our last keynote, it's an honor to introduce our final keynote speaker for today, Usha Rengaraju. She's the founder of Neuro AI, India's first symposium merging neuroscience and data science, a chief data scientist, corporate trainer, and autism advocate. Well, that's not enough. She's a thought leader in machine learning, deep learning, and probabilistic graphical models with a profound impact on shaping data science education in India. At the same time, Usha has also been connected with PyCon India since long as the CFP reviewer. So let's welcome her again with a bigger round of applause this time.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much everyone for gathering here. And so today's topic is going to be a very interesting one. It's AI for autism. I can also rephrase it as generative AI for autism because all of the AI which I'm using here is Gen AI. So that's really hot on the market. So it might interest a lot of you. And all right, let's get started with today's session. So she's already introduced me. So if at all you want to know more about me, I would recommend going and... Is my voice audible? Yeah, I would recommend going and digging through my LinkedIn profile. You'll find a lot of what I do. And recently I started contributing to Keras, mainly the Keras Hub library. So you can just go to my GitHub repository, find a lot of open source projects. And my GitHub username is Usha Reng. You'll find this. And my Kaggle's username is TensorGirl. So you'll not find my name in Kaggle. So you'll have to search with TensorGirl. So today's presentation, I would have used a lot of slides and pictures which will be from the internet. None of it is created. The pictures and the drawings are from the internet. I would give credit to all those internet websites for those pictures. So yeah, the demos will be, these are the demos which I'll be showing through the session. So I'm saying the reason why I put it up as a first slide is because we'll have a first 20 minutes of introductory talk to neurodiversity and autism for people who are completely new to it before we get started with the demos. So you can have a look at it if these are the kind of technical topics which is interesting for you. We have AAC tool for non-verbal autism people who cannot speak, but sometimes may be functioning but cannot speak. So we have very interesting tools out there. All of it is open source, and you'll find the source codes completely in my GitHub repository. One thing which is left in completing this into product is the hardware integration. So the AI part is completely done and the software part is completely done. So you'll find a lot of front-end, back-end, complete to product here. But how do you integrate it with the hardware is the only thing which is pending. And so the audience out here, you can take my software side, integrate it with hardware, release it as a product. It's completely open source Apache 2 license, so you can do whatever you want on top of it. And before we get started with the demo, we'll have a brief introduction about neurodiversity. And before I do that, I would like to thank the PyCon India organizers. So for inviting me for a keynote to do specifically a talk on AI for autism. So PyCon has been one of the premier conferences across the globe. And it's the first conference in India to give a platform for autism back in 2020. So from 2020, PyCon India has been hosting sessions on neurodiversity. It had set the gold standard for other conferences to follow. So back in 2021, the adoption there was a lot of stigma about autism and neurodiversity. I think PyCon India played a huge role in breaking that stigma and autism. At this point of time, right now it's 2024. In a month, I get called to speak at least 2 to 3 companies for autism. So the situation has changed in 2024. But back in 2019, 2020, PyCon was the only conference and the first conference to break that stigma and do I think they did a panel discussion on neurodiversity and all. And year on year, every year you will find a talk on neurodiversity in PyCon India. So I should thank the organizers for being empathetic, for being truly inclusive and setting the standards right. So congratulations and huge to the organizers. So all of this tool, you can just hit on one website, which is usharank.github.io autism. You'll find all these 7 tools which I've developed. So if you want a single snapshot link where you can find all the links of the entire source code, you can just hit this on. Software and AI part, front end, back end, everything is completed. The only part which is pending is the hardware integration, and I'll tell you what kind of hardware you need to integrate with. Maybe some people who have specialization in tools, medical devices, integration, you can take it upon. My specialization is not hardware, so I'm unable to do it. And so you can replace Gemini with any open source LLM. I participated in the Gemini API developer competition, which is $1 million challenge. So I did everything with Gemini, but you replace Gemini with some open source LLM like Gemma, Mistral, Lalama, like any of the good ones, you can replace it. So yeah, we'll get started with what is neurodiversity. So a lot of people ask me, what is neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is about the neural variations in brain. A lot of time, people have a huge stigma about neurodiversity. It is just the variations in brain. Different doesn't mean it is less. So a lot of conditions like autism, ADHD, which are completely undiagnosed. There are adults in autism. When we do autism awareness sessions, at least when we do sessions for an audience of 800 online. So there were once in one of the organizations, we did a session for 800 people, and out of which 30 of them got diagnosed with ADHD and autism. So a lot of people don't know what autism is. Autism is a spectrum conditions. So some people are on the higher end of the spectrum where they are high functioning, they are fully functioning, they can do regular jobs, day-to-day jobs, but they're just different. They have specific conditions or they specific needs. Maybe they do not like too much of noise. They cannot be in a crowded place, or they want food with a certain texture, but they are fully functioning and they can do every job. Elon Musk is an openly autistic person. He's one of the top global leaders in AI and software and everything, right? He is openly autistic. He had come out in a television interview and he said he's an autistic. So he's on the higher end of the spectrum. So it's a spectrum condition. There are people on the lower end of the spectrum who might be completely dependent on their parents, who might require a lot of support and things to do their day-to-day activities. There are people like Elon Musk who are on the higher end of the spectrum, who are completely fully functioning. Steve Jobs is rumored to be an autistic person on the higher end of the spectrum. We have Microsoft, Bill Gates again, and even world famous football player Lionel Messi is rumored to be having diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome when he was 8 years old. Asperger's syndrome is a specific condition which is referred to as the other name for higher end of the autism spectrum condition. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. Because of it, a lot of adults in India get diagnosed when they're 35 and 40 because they don't have and knowledge that or awareness that autism is a spectrum condition. So even at 30, 35, even if they get diagnosed, that's still been a transformational moment for them in life. Till that point, they would have think there's something really wrong with them or things. The moment they get a diagnosis, they're able to understand why they behave in a certain way. So you have a spectrum of conditions in autism: dyslexia, ADHD, autism, epilepsy, all of it comes under the umbrella of neurodiversity. So, but my focus will be predominantly on autism because that's where my specialty in, and I've been an advocate for really long time, and I've been advocating in the intersection of AI and autism. So I'll be focusing more on autism, but neurodiversity has other, conditions which fall under that big umbrella as well. So it's a competitive advantage unless, the companies have started thinking or embracing neurodiversity as a competitive advantage. There's a lot of fintech organizations out there who are hell-bent on hiring autistic individuals, who have a separate autism hiring programs as well. SAP has this autism hiring program. Microsoft has an autism hiring program. So it's now companies are embracing it as a competitive advantage. So again, Asperger's syndrome was until 2013, the higher end of the spectrum autism condition was named as Asperger's syndrome. It's only in 2013, it is merged under autism spectrum condition. That is where a lot of misunderstanding and there's a lot of things. So before 2013, autism on the higher end of the spectrum was called as Asperger's syndrome. So these names and terminologies will be used interchangeably. If you're reading a lot of research papers or a clinical papers about these conditions, these are terminologies and names which will be used interchangeably. So, to help you understand that, I'm just pointing it out. So I think most of you can connect easily with movies and stories. I think Good Doctor is one movie. Being an advocate for so long, I think they've got it right. How many of you watched Good Doctor? All right, Good Doctor, the protagonist is an autistic individual on the higher end of the spectrum. So they've got it very right, in my opinion. Again, it's a spectrum condition. Every individual is different. So at least, they've got it at least 90% right. So another movie is Accountant. How many of you watched this movie? The protagonist is again on the higher end of the spectrum, autism condition. So the some movies, Indian movies up next. My Name is Khan. Everyone watched it? How many people watched My Name is Khan? Only few people. Again, the protagonist is an autistic individual. So if you see, autism is a competitive advantage right now. They're different doesn't mean they're less. Or, whether autism is a disability or not is a whole new debate, which I don't want to get into today because the topic here is AI for autism. I'll leave that too. But autistic individuals, every individual is different. But there are certain characteristics which they share among the spectrum, but you can't, just because you met one autistic individual, you cannot generalize this is how every autistic individual in the world will be. Every individual is different, and that's why you require an open mindset. But there are certain characteristics which might be shared across the people or individuals in the spectrum. Some of them are, some people might be very, very sensitive to certain food texture. Sometimes people might be very sensitive to a heavy crowd. And even too many, when people have autism hiring programs, what they should also take into account is autistic individuals are very sensitive to too many meetings. They're very sensitive to distractions. You have 5 to 6 meetings in the day, you have ruined their day. They have to sleep over to get up and have a fresh mood. For them, and an autistic individual, if you disturb them with a meeting, with just conversations, their ability to do that intense focus goes out. So autistic individuals are known for their ability to pay intense focus over a longer period of time. That's one of their special gifts, at least for most of them. So you keep 5, 6 meetings in a day. That's it, you have ruined their concentration. They have to sleep over to come back to their full intense mood of concentration. So when you develop or design an autism hiring program, you should also design the work environment which works out well for them. And at least in the board, there will be a board of people who design those programs. On the board, at least there should be 2 to 3 people who are autistic individuals themselves. Because they are neurologically different people. And so, you're a non-autistic individual designing for somebody, programs and systems for somebody who's completely neurologically different for them might be very difficult. So you need to have autistic individuals on the board to design such hiring programs, to design such work environment for them, which is something missing. That is what I would like to point out. You should be very extremely cautious when you're doing such programs. So there are historically, autism has always been there, but the terminologies, the jargons, we are just getting used to it right now. 2013, I think the autism spectrum conditions was, labeled. And then, Asperger's syndromes, there's been like few 30, 40 years, these terminologies are around. But then autism as a condition was always there, but under different names, or sometimes it was unlabeled and things like that. So historically, we had people who have got exceptional achievements, who were all on the spectrum conditions. So I think the reason once Elon Musk is like an ambassador for autism, I think he, to an extent, by going out there in a television interview and confessing that he is an autistic individual, he has brought down the stigma to a lot of greater extent. Amongst the other leaders, there are a lot of leaders who are rumored to be autistic, but Elon Musk was one of the persons who went out there in a television interview and he did that. And by doing that, he brought down the stigma, which helped a lot of advocates like me. So Lionel Messi again. So there, when you say inclusion, the genuine inclusion is not like, when you do a D&I program, it's not like having a checklist. Okay, I need to hire so many women there. I need to hire so many this category. I need to do so many things. You cannot have a checklist. Each and every condition is very specific and demands specific kind of attention and detail. And you have to take it case by case. Even under neurodiversity, autism is very different from ADHD, but autistic individuals also have ADHD. It's an overlapping condition, but each and every condition is different, and you require different kind of attention to detail and different way of dealing with each of these conditions. So that's also something where you have to take into control, when you design D&I programs. So there are a lot of companies who are autism-friendly employers. Right now, even in India, SAP, JP Morgan Chase, and you have Credit Suisse, Wells Fargo is the biggest advocate of, you'll find a lot of fintech companies out here. There are more fintech companies who are specifically interested in hiring autistic individuals. At least in India, I'm not sure of the trend outside India. And autistic individuals have, although every individual is different, one of the characters you will find very common across the spectrum is their ability to understand patterns. So ability to understand unique patterns, this might be working out very well, especially in AI jobs. So there's a lot of people who are hiring autistic individuals specifically for AI-related jobs. So the companies like, SAP and HP, they have put in, Harvard Business Review, they have put an article how for a specific department, they have hired a group of autistic individuals who helped them save $40 million. This was a research article which you will find in Harvard Business Review, which is put out by HP and SAP. So because of their unique ability to come out and their out-of-box thinking, to come out with the totally different solution, which was thought not doable, and they were able to do it. So there are a lot of cases and case studies out there in Harvard Business Review, where the employers who have hired autistic individuals found them to be very effective in doing what they were doing and resulted in a lot of, millions of dollars in revenue as well. So I would recommend going and reading out. And one more thing, if you see autistic brain and the non-autistic brain and the Asperger's brain. So autistic people are more visual. This is very important, especially when you're designing products. So when you're designing a front-end products, you are only thinking, most of them at every point of time, 90% of the front-end UX designers, you're taking into account the non-autistic individuals or the majority group. But you should also take into account marginalized group, especially neurodiverse group, because they are more of visual people. They're very sensitive to certain colors. They're sensitive. So are you taking into all these considerations to account when you're designing UI for your product? When it comes for learning as well, they're more visual people. If you're putting your slides too much of theory and there's no diagrams, that may not be friendly for an autistic individual. So when you're designing a learning curriculum, you should also try to make it more neurodivergent friendly. So with that, I'll wrap up the introduction to neurodiversity. From now, we'll get on to the actual topic, which is AI for autism. So out of all the use cases for AI for autism, I'm focusing on 4 of them. So there are plenty of other use cases as well. 4 of them I've been able to successfully do it in using AI, and I've open sourced the code. So if there are any hardware engineers out there, I'll give you an exact tip on how to do integration and stuff, but I'm just not into hardware, so I'm not able to do it myself, but the AI side and the software side, I can help if anyone is interested in taking it up. So the first use case is about early diagnosis of autism. The reason why this use case is very, very important is because a human brain takes about 5 years. For a child's brain to completely develop, it takes about 5 years of time. So if you can diagnose autism as early as 12 months to 18 months, there's a higher probability the child can live a completely independent life. There's a higher probability, that's all. You can't say with 100% certainty the child will lead. There's higher probability if you can diagnose autism when the child is 12 to 18 months, the child can live a completely independent life. Because you have a lot of early intervention programs, which is very sophisticated, even in India. In US, it's much more advanced, especially the New Jersey area and all. You've got advanced centers. But even in India, in cities like Bangalore, you've got very good centers where there are excellent early intervention programs. If you diagnose it at 1 to 2 years, there's high probability. That's why early detection of autism is a very important use case. In India, on an average, until 2019-20, the parents used to misdiagnose the children and end up diagnosing only when the child is about 7 to 8 years. At that time, it is too late. There's not much clinically which can be done when the child is diagnosed at 7 to 8 and child ends up being completely dependent on the parent. So how this can be solved using AI? We have got a benchmark data set called ABIDE, which was collected by neurologists across the globe. And this is the only benchmark data set which we have. In India, data collection is becoming extremely difficult. I even tried collaborating with some neurologists from certain hospital in Bangalore. But the parents are extremely cautious about their children that we were not getting the consent to collect the MRI scans. But I do hope the situation changes in future. But at the moment, we have only one benchmark data set, which is called ABIDE, which is out there for us. It's an open source data set, so it's freely downloadable. So Autism Brain Imaging Data Exchange, this is what ABIDE stands for. So you can do early diagnosis. Right now, there's a research from Stanford which says you can do early diagnosis of autism as early as when the child is in the mother's womb itself. There's a research paper which has come out from Stanford as well. So there's plenty of research which is going in this particular area. And the pipeline which I have put together using a BITE data set is very simple. It's an MRI imaging data set. So I'm doing a basic pre-processing on MRI imaging data set. Once I do that, I'm doing a segmentation and extracting all the important features, and then I'm just doing a simple image classification on top of it. This is the AI pipeline which I'm doing, but you can do, just a simple basic image classification as well. So some of the very good algorithms for medical imaging is UNETAR was one of the benchmark algorithms which has come out. There are plenty of benchmark algorithms which has come out from NVIDIA as well for medical imaging and classification. So this is about the first use case. The second, third, and the fourth use case is about the emotion detection in multiple modalities. So autistic individual, what is one hurdle? See, there are plenty of autism hiring programs, but there are plenty of autistic individuals as well. But why aren't the company able to hire them? What is stopping from them? Most of the companies which I've interacted from them, we have a lot of hiring programs, but we are not able to hire even a single individual. So what is the gap? There's some gap. That's why they're not able to get the individual. So one of the biggest gap there is the emotion part. So autistic individuals have trouble understanding emotions in multiple modalities. It is text, speech, and it could be facial emotion. So it's not like every individual will not understand 100%. They might understand emotions in a range. So some people can understand 40%, some people can understand 60%. But they do have difficulties. The range differs from individual to individual, but in general, they have difficulties interpreting emotions in multiple modalities. One of the modalities is text modality. You're hiring an autistic individual and the manager sends out an email full of sarcasm. Sarcasm, sadness, anger, and all that he's putting in an email and sending it. There's higher probability the individual would not read any of these sarcasm, anger, sadness, nothing. He would just read the literal content of what is written in an email. That's all. So they have trouble understanding. I think this one, good doctor and both good doctor and accountant, I think they got it really well. So it could be text emotion detection in text. For a working environment, it could be very simple like an email or any passage. It could be facial emotions as well. To do an effective communication, you need to understand most of the non-autistic people try to communicate a lot of it through their emotions, lot of it through their body language. If they're angry, nobody tells, I am angry now. So you change the way you're speaking. Do we communicate like that? If you're angry, you show in your face, right? You become red and your nostrils flare up. But there are other social cues in which you say you're angry. Nobody says explicitly, I am angry. But nobody says explicitly, I'm going to cry now, right? You just show it in your body language and things. But autistic individual might have difficulty interpreting that body language, have difficulty interpreting that facial emotions. So because they are not able to understand a person who is opposite to them is angry, they're not able to change the way they communicate. Well, if they understand, they can communicate effectively. So understanding emotions is becoming a huge barrier for them to communicate effectively in a work environment or in a very social environment as well. So that is also one of the biggest problems. So that can be solved using AI. The third one is understanding emotions and speech modality. So you're getting on a call with them. A lot of it is remote work these days. A lot of things gets done over phone or a Zoom call or a phone call. So even they have difficulty understanding multiple. If you're angry, a lot of people tend to increase their voice. They increase the tonalities in their voice, reduce the tonalities in the voice. So they have difficulty in understanding the tonal differences as well. So the range at which they differ, they have facing difficulties differ from individual to individual. So every individual has differences. So every individual is different, but it's only on a range they are not able to understand. So that range differs from person to person. So we are going to see the text emotion detection pipeline. So this is going to be very easy. So we've got a data set out there. We've got a much more very good open source. For speech data set, we've got an open source benchmark data set out there. So for any speech data or audio data, you can convert it into MEL spectrograms. You can use libraries like Librosa, or there are other phenomenal libraries out there, open source libraries. You can convert into MEL spectrograms, do all these feature extraction. Then it's a basic image classification pipelines. Once you convert it into a MEL spectrogram, which is nothing but images, then it's a basic image classification pipeline. And we've got plenty of open source data sets for speech. And for text, we have got Go Emotions data set, which is a benchmark data set from Google. Again, for this use case also, we have got very good data set. It's an extensive data set. And text classification pipeline is very simple. You can use any of the LLMs which has come out. You can just try a few shot classification or zero shot classification using LLMs. It's still going to work. So there's the most easiest use case right now. And facial emotion detection, again, I think we have an open source data set, AffectNet. There are plenty of other open source data sets out there as well. So facial emotion detections are state-of-the-art architectures as such, or you can do an image classification. Right now, there are a lot of vision language models out there, so you can also try using vision language models as well. And there's one more use case which is very, very important. So this is how to use AI to teach behaviorals, social expressions for autistic individuals. This is a very important use case. Sometimes there is a difference in communication styles between an autistic individual and the non-autistic individual. So most of the parents of an autistic individual may not be autistics themselves. Sometimes they are, sometimes they may not be. So because of this difference in communication, sometimes they might be trying to communicate something to their child, but the child may not be able to interpret what they're trying to say. So they might have to repeat it 100 times, 200 times. At some point, an autistic individual's parent might have a mental breakdown as well. But if it's going to be robots may not break down even if you tell that to repeat 100 times, 200 times. So they have found, in general, robots are very effective in training autistic individuals and teaching them behavioral skills and social skills. So this is a very good use case. This has already been created. And there's a robot out there in the market called Milo, which teaches autistic individuals social and behavioral skills. It's $5,000. It's already out there in US market, but it might be a little too costly for an Indian market. So if most of the autistic individuals, if you see their parents, they're single parents, because bringing up an autistic individual is very, very demanding. Most of them, you will find it as single parents. It might be little too much for an Indian market. $5,000 might be a little too high for an Indian market. So there's still a lot of scope for improvisation. We can build a low-cost tool which can work out really well for Indian market. I'll play out the video of the US tool which is available out there. Is a video. Yeah. So yeah, now I'm going to show some demos which I've developed. And let's start with the first demo, which is going to be an assistive tool for non-verbal autistic people. So non-verbal autistic people have difficulty typing. There are people on the lower end of the spectrum. Some of them have their hands shivering and things like that, and they cannot speak. So there are people who cannot speak on the autism spectrum, but they don't have any shivering hands and like this. For people who don't have hand shivering and all those difficulties, they can type on the keyboard. We have got directly text to voice conversions. We have got very good models, AI models out there, T5 and many very phenomenal models out there, which will take the text as input and convert it into voice. But what if the person has difficulty even typing it? Their hands are shivering. That's where the AAC tool, assistive and augmentative tool can help a lot for people. They just tap. They tap one word and the tool suggests what the next word will be. So I've developed this using an LLM, large language model. I think you can replace LLM with any LLM of your favorite choice. I was not able to do the images that really well. I had a very short time for the Gemini API development. I think I put together this in the 4 to 5 days, the front end, back end and everything. So, if you have a lot of time, you can use much better diffusion models for the image generation and large language models for the next word prediction. You can combine both of it and you can improvise on the open source model, which I've done. So I'll show a demo of what I've done. So this is AAC tool for non-verbal autistic people. So you type the first word. So the child just has to tap. It also comes with pictures. The words also will have pictures. So, because autistic individuals are visual people. So they type first word. All right, the demo is there out there on the GitHub, so you can just check it out. So it might take some time for... Which one is one? So that's one of the very interesting tools, and then there's... This is about the emotion detection functionality. So this is about detecting text emotion from sentence. I've done this using Gemini. You can replace Gemini with other open source LLMs as well. So you can build this as an you can Chrome extension. I have converted this into a Chrome extension, and the code, entire source code, I have open sourced it as well. So it's a Chrome extension, so anybody can plug it into their web browser, and then, there'll be a pop-up where you can put the text for which you want the emotion, and then that should be able to do. I've converted the same use case into an Android app as well. If some person is a mobile person, mobile friendly, they prefer doing everything on mobile, they can get it done through mobile as well. So, and then for facial emotion detection, it is just uploading an image and then finding out what the emotions in that image is. So how this can be integrated to hardware is what we have to focus on. If you understand, I'll just pause this here. I'll show you how this can be integrated. The facial emotion can be integrated with hardware. So if you see, Google Glass was released for a different purpose, but it was predominantly used by autistic individuals to find emotions. So, you take that emotion detection in face using LLMs, you have to integrate it with the hardware like this. So that, when autistic individuals wear them, they'll be able to see the other person and find out their emotions can come either in the form of a WhatsApp message or a textual message, or they can directly plug in a sensor device which will communicate to them live. Okay, the other person in front of you is angry. Maybe it's time to change the way you interact and things like that. They'll get real-time feedback. So text emotion detection is a straightforward AI problem. Using LLMs, you can detect emotions in text, you can detect emotions in face, you can detect emotions in voice. All three of it, you can do it using LLMs. So the AI part is pretty much straightforward, but how do you integrate that AI with a hardware device like this is where the challenge is. So for text, it is very easy. It's just a browser extension and Android app, which I've done. But for facial emotion and voice emotion detection, you require a hardware integration device. Google shut down their Google Glasses in 2019 and 2017. It was not operational. So we require people to come up with similar kind of hardware device and release them in Indian market. So I've also built a device where you can enter a text and you can convert that to voice as well. So I've built a chatbot again for autistic individuals. The resources for autism are very sparsely distributed and not the top 5 searches which comes out when you Google about neurodiversity in autism are not recommended by the autistic community. So I've taken a bunch of resources which are recommended by autistic individuals and created that as an open source data set. And I've spun a chatbot on top of it. So if you want to ask any queries which is related to autism and neurodiversity, you can query the chatbot and get answers. But my data set is very small in device. So again, this is one of the use cases which can be expanded. So the data set which I created is again open source. The chatbot code, everything is open source. You can take, this open source code and build on top of it, create an, chatbot user interface where both for parents of autistic individuals, for autistic individuals themselves, whatever queries they have, they can query and get answers out of it. So these are some of the use cases which I've developed, the Android app, and all of it you can find in my GitHub repository. My GitHub repository is Wusha Reng. You will find my GitHub repository here. So there are around 7 tools which I have built. So if you can follow me on GitHub and you can head on to my GitHub repository to find all these source codes. So the demos which you will find in my GitHub repository are here. So these are the bunch of demos which you will find in my repository, specifically which I developed for Gemini API developer competition. That's why it's all Gemini. But then feel free to replace it with any open source LLMs. And this is about some of the use cases and AI for autism sessions. We are going to wind up the session. And so again, if you want all the source code at the single snapshot, you can head on to this URL as well. We've come to the end of the session. There are plenty of research papers out there. I would definitely recommend. I have just solved 7 use cases, but there are plenty of other very interesting use cases. I would recommend going through the research papers. Yeah, we've come to the end of the session. So these are my credentials. If you want to hit me up in email, LinkedIn, Twitter, GitHub, Medium, and Kaggle, you can follow me. And these are my credentials. And it's a wrap. And you have any questions, you can ask. I think we have 10 minutes for questions. Yeah, we have 10 minutes for questions. If there are any questions, you can ask now, and I can take 2 questions, and more than 2 questions, I'll be outside as well after that. So you can.
Yeah. Folks, if we have any questions, we can quickly head over there. There's a mic at that end, at the center of the room. And if you have any questions, we can line up in a queue, and Usha can then answer them for you.
All right. If you have questions, you can raise your hands. Yeah.
I really appreciate your efforts in bringing this up. Can we bring this bot kind of thing in India as such, environment as such? Because there are a lot of organizations that are working for, helping autism kids, and I've seen a couple of them as well. I mean, this will really be useful if it can, if it can be done in Indian environment as well. Is that really possible to bring that here?
It's definitely possible. We have excellent robotic engineers. We have excellent, people who can work with chips, semiconductors, and VLSI designers, all of them in India. So we can definitely build a much better robot in India than Milo and give it for a very cheaper cost. It's possible to develop it for, 10,000 and 15,000 as well. We have excellent resources in India to do that. So definitely it's possible. It's just that all these topics, since autism is considered a stigma, at least for the earlier, like 2-3 years back, at least people would hesitate to speak about it on a public forum. So that's on these topics was very less. The more awareness we create, the more people will get to know about the possibilities of creating such tools. So I am working on creating awareness so that people who are immensely talented in semiconductors, VLSI, data science, chip design, robotics, and all these people can come forward, build some tools out there for the Indian market, which is more affordable for the Indian market. So that's why I'm spending all my energy in creating awareness. So for autism in India, 80% of the problem will get solved if you create autism, awareness. So awareness, top three things for autism: advocacy, awareness, awareness, awareness. So that will solve 80% of the problem. So that is why I'm like going company after company, giving sessions on AI for autism. Again, there's reason why I do for AI for autism. Because when you say autism 101 or neurodiversity 101, we have 10 attendees sitting there. When you say autism, AI for autism, the first session, I think I did it on 2019 for a multinational corporation in India. That was a COVID time. We had 800 people watching it online. Especially 2019, 2020 was like, AI was really the hype, that time and all. So that's why I do it as AI for autism. So that way, underneath the AI, there's a lot of advocacy which I'm doing, making people, destigmatizing the topic, making people aware of the use cases.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's say if the autism pattern is different for different individuals, then how AI can suggest the right learning content for them? And is there any human intervention that would be required?
Definitely there is human intervention which is required, but we can, using AI, we can bring down the amount of human intervention. We can keep it as 15% human intervention, but 85% can be automated. So based on the child's behavioral patterns, observing the child's behavioral patterns, learning patterns, whether they like certain kinds of studies, because most of the autistic individuals have special interest in certain topics. They might be totally disinterested in. So you might have to observe the child's behavior over a period of time. So the AI itself would require some data to learn about the child behavioral patterns to be able to predict and give the right kind of recommendations and score. Definitely we can automate up to 85%, but there should be 15% manual intervention of the parent involved. So that is to be on the safer side.
Great. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, Usha.
Yeah, hi.
So my question is, like, we see a lot of issues currently going around the responsible AI.
Yeah.
And when it comes to AI and autism, so I have two sides of coins I'm looking into. So one is the ethical concerns. Like, how are we as a person, like, we are taking the concerns, like taking the responsible side that this data is being kept properly. Second, like, is the people really comfortable having discussions with AI on this? Like, this is a very emotional and a personal thing. So how this thing is taken into consideration? Because a lot of places, as I'm seeing, like medically, people are not that much open to discuss all about this, like mental health and all this. So how is this thing been slowly been taken and accepted by society? Can you put some light on that?
Okay. Right now, the number of mainstream tools to address these concerns for autism is very limited. And very, very minimal tools, especially the ones which have shown AASC tools for autism. There's an alumni from IIT Madras back in Chennai. They are a team. I forgot the name of the startup. They're a startup, and he is the father of an autistic child. And so he has come up with an AASC tool, but it's all paid versions of tool. So right now, the number of mainstream tools which are out there are very limited. And are they following all these responsible AI techniques? I'm really not sure. Because solving these, in this scenario, solving the challenge itself is very complex. So at this point of time, as far as I've observed, they're solving the challenge, but these following responsible AI framework, taking ethical into consideration is not done that well. But I think at some point of time, once they've stabilized their product, that should be their second level of attention, which they're going to pay into account. So since I was not involved in the product development of those apps and things like that, I really can't comment much with it, which if they have followed responsible AI framework and things like that. But I think, this is a very nascent stage, so we'll get there at some point.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, hi. Do you have any advice for people who suspect they are, subclinically having symptoms like, not able to keep a track of time or
Yeah. So there are two options. One is DSM-5 manual is out there. So the questionnaire is out there. So if you do not wish to visit a clinician, you can download that course. You just download that questionnaire online and you can take it and you will be able to evaluate yourself if an individual is not interested in visiting a clinic or a doctor. But if the individual is okay visiting a clinical, then you might have to visit an adult neurologist. So if you find if the person is adult, you would want to go to a neurologist for checkups. Most of the hospitals have pediatric neurologists and adult neurologists. Pediatric neurologist deals with kids and who are like less than 9, 12 years, they deal with them. More than 15 years old, it's advisable to consult an adult neurologist who specializes in autism. In India, you should be extremely cautious because I have been in advocacy for a really long time. In India, you should be extremely cautious, but it's not like you Google up and find out neurologist in Bangalore, just hit an appointment and go. Don't do that. Ask the neurologist if he specializes in autism specifically. Because most of the neurologists, you go there and some of them whom I have interacted with very prominent hospitals, they are neurologists and they are not aware of autism as a spectrum conditions. So you will be very surprised and shocked. So we have heard so many stories like this. So if you want to do a self-diagnosis and if you have doubts and if you want to visit any hospital, you should ask for adult neurologist if you're more than 15 years old, and you should check if the neurologist has a specialization in autism. Or if you have doubts with regards to ADHD, there are neurologists who specializes in ADHD. It will be there written in their profile, but you can explicitly ask the receptionist of the hospital as well, confirm that. If that is not going to be, if you don't do that, the reason is the consequences will be very severe. Because a neurologist who doesn't specialize in autism will give wrong medication. That misdiagnosis can have the biggest effect on autistic individual. They'll give all wrong diagnosis, wrong medication that will put you in trouble. So just get these two things clarified. And if you just do not want to visit hospitals and all, there are questionnaires out there. There are some 5 manuals out there. You can download it. The first round of analysis, you can do it. And then you can, based on the results which you get, you can go to a clinician.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. What about workplace situations people constantly interrupting and,
right now, at least since the awareness is slowly increasing compared to 2018, 2024 is really good. There are a lot of companies who have neurodiversity employment resource group. Adobe, many companies, Walmart, Adobe, JP Morgan, everyone. You name any big company in Bangalore, they all have employee resource group for neurodiversity. And specifically, some of the companies have autism neurodiversity employee resource group. So they have started designing workplaces which is specifically works very well for autistic individuals. There are cubicles. It's a plug and play cubicle, so they don't have to manufacture anything new. It's already out there in market. Those are cubicles which will have minimal distractions for them. So there are many companies who have already installed that cubicles in their campuses in Bangalore. So it's already out there in market and it's already incorporated by many of them. So those are cubicles which are soundproof, some of them which are soundproof and which are designed in such a way which has minimal distractions and things like that. And some of them, when they talk with their managers, they can discuss and get them changed to a different work portfolio where they're mostly individual contributors and they have less distractions in the form of meetings and things like that. So, I think there's slowly more conversations coming out and that's it, but still in the nascent stage. Right now we're just, hitting the surface. I think there's a long way to go, but at least people are talking about it, right?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, is that it? Then I'll be outside. You can ask questions with regards to anything autism. And my full name, usharengraju@gmail.com. If you want to hit me up with regards to autism. And you can follow me on LinkedIn because I do a lot of such talks and sessions. GitHub repository, please take all my open source products, open source codes and build integrated with hardware. release some products out there in the market. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, PyCon India, for making autism mainstream. See, most of the conferences, they keep autism and diversity as some kind of a side activity, or somewhere hidden, some booth will have autism talks. But PyCon India has made autism the mainstream. They've made it a keynote. Huge applause to PyCon India. Thank you so much.